This episode of Talking Success is proudly sponsored by Pair Network, a platform that transforms professional networks into valuable assets. Through Pair, companies can access a wider range of qualified individuals, speed up time to hire, and reduce cost to hire significantly. The support for today's discussion underscores the commitment to advancing the future of talent acquisition. Enjoy the conversation.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talking Success. We've had a bit of a break for the last few weeks. I've been crazy with a couple of projects that I may give mention to during this podcast if I'm allowed a bit of self-promotion. But we're going on a very different track today. Something that has really been missing, which is quite surprising if many of you know my background and that I've been in the world of sort of staffing for the last 25 years or so. And the one topic I've not covered in the last 4 years of doing this podcast is talent. It was one of those moments, those eureka moments, to go, what do we talk about? In terms of a bit of a theme moving forward for the next couple of months. And the obvious thing was, well, talent. So I'm delighted to be joined by Erin Louw, who is head of people at none other than TymeBank, who probably needs no introduction if you're in South Africa. If you're outside of South Africa and you're wondering who TymeBank is, well, I'm going to let Erin tell you a bit about them. But we do have a recording, which was, I think, the beginning of last year with TymeBank's founder, Kunyonka, who is just one of the most incredible people with the most incredible stories of how TymeBank became what it is today. But that's enough of me talking. I'm going to hand over to Erin. Erin, lovely to have you on. Thanks so much for spending the time this morning to chat with me. We had a few technical things that we were working out a minute ago, but hopefully everything's okay and stable. I'd love to get a quick intro, a bit about your background and kind of where you are today and a bit about the journey, because I know it's been pretty epic, right?
Thanks, Darren. So Erin Louw, my background's actually in sports medicine and psychology. So I'm going to give a little bit of my age away, but about 20 years ago, I absolutely fell in love with finance and FinTech. At that stage, it was consumer finance. So I started within the RC's group, started out introducing corporate wellness programs in a time 20 years ago in South Africa where
Wasn't it?
there was
Yeah.
literally nothing. So if you wanted to know about corporate wellness, you looked at stuff done in the States. So started with a program, spent 8 years there, wanted to expand and spread my wings. Worked in Africa, had my own company, then joined the fintech environment. Love it. So yeah, it's consumer finance, fintech, and now banking has kind of been the environments that I find myself feeling most safe and comfortable and where I know the ins and outs. I suppose I'm somebody that's equally comfortable in the people realm as well as in the number space because you ultimately everything boils down to pluses and minuses. So if you're able to connect behavior and how people think and you can pick up patterns and you can start seeing certain trends happening, especially when it comes to people in your business, I think it becomes just so much more valuable, a lot more tangible versus just the kind of guesswork that people think is the challenge about managing people. So, I mean, I absolutely love it. I'm a mom of two
Okay.
girls that's in the future going to be changing the world by any rate at which they're going now. I think I definitely get challenged more at home than I do at the office. And I always say to the guys, sure, being a mom makes me a really good employee, and being a good employee makes me, I suppose, a really great mom. So the two worlds live in harmony with each other so far, touch wood. And yeah, married to an entrepreneur. So I have really spent most of my career dealing with speaking to living in a world where I'm just being kept real, where the corporate world and all of the philosophies and thoughts that we have about it, I really get to test against, is that even practical? Is that real? Does that work at scale? Or is this just something that we're envisioning in a glass tower concept thinking? So I think that's just been an added
Wow.
advantage for
That's,
me
uh,
in
Oh,
throughout my
I have so many
career.
questions. As many of you sort of follow us and watch the podcast, you know that nothing's scripted at all, right? This is all just a conversation between a couple of people. So, my first question: you've mentioned, I think, 3 times in your opening sort of introduction about how passionate you are and how much you've kind of fallen in love with the world of fintech. What is it about the
Yeah.
industry that kind of really fascinates you and keeps you kind of motivated and engaged with the sector?
It's the fact that it's never the same. And I think that's something very much that speaks to me as a person. I need to feel stimulated. I need to wake up every morning and know that it's not going to be the same day. I know it sounds crazy, and I know a lot of people very much yearn for stability and security and the same thing, but I'm different in that way. So I like the fact that I can wake up in the morning and I know that I'm going to be dealing with things that I definitely cannot foresee. And that's kind of very much the world, the fast pace, the agility, needing to pivot ideas, being creative. So it's creative in my solutions that I'm trying to position within the business, but also creative in my empathy, and understanding people, where they're trying to come from, and setting their work environment up. And that's the part of the fintech and financial environment that very much speaks to me. And then, as I mentioned to you earlier, I love the fact that I can work with numbers too. That's my other passion. So being able to not just deal with conversationalistic concepts, for me, being able to translate that into analytics and building dashboards and being able to translate and communicate a very creative and sometimes fuzzy world to a bunch of most likely financially inclined, statistical, CA minded people, and merging, like creating a bridge in that environment, is what gives me energy. It's what I absolutely get
I've
up
always
for in
been
the morning.
fascinated about the world of sort of people analytics, and this is something that I think has sort of not exploded, but has certainly grown in terms of its adoption, its understanding over the last 10, 15 years or so. Can you give us a bit of insight into what people analytics is? I mean, you mentioned the sort of the numbers
Yeah.
and looking at statistics and having dashboards, without giving any sort of idea away or
I
anything like
think
that.
you want me to give all my
Give us
secrets.
an idea what that looks like. So, if you take yourself out of TymeBank for a
Yeah.
moment, and you were talking to, a peer and talking about a dashboard, what would that look like from a people perspective?
Yeah, so if I speak to any business owner, and I've done that throughout my career, even in my consulting environment, as I said, as you sit there today, do you know your numbers when it comes to the people that you've got in your business? Do you know how many people you have employed? Do you know in what levels they are in the organization? Do you know how many of them want to grow? How many of them want to stay operational or be more generalists? Because I think there's very often a blanket approach to managing people, or the people divisions, where we go back to the theory and the philosophy, and by not making it tailored to the individuals in the business, it loses its value. So people want choice, they want convenience, and they want a fantastic experience. So in order to provide those three things, I need to know, what am I dealing with, and I need to make informed decisions. So informed decisions literally comes from information, and information comes from data. Now, you can have many data sources. Some of them are a little bit more quantifiable, some of them are a
Yeah.
bit more qualitative. If I get to the very nuts and bolts of it, I mean, obviously your payroll sources of, there's so much more in there if you really go and you start connecting the dots. But I'm not even talking about that. For me, people experience, rating your HR team, like, or your people team, or your managers, performance reviews. It should, all of those things should be translated into numbers that tells you about the health of your organization. Now, you can put anything into zeros and ones, right? Anything. So it's being able to create that pattern and then interpret that information and translate that into insights. So I think if you're able to close that loop, and it's different at different times. So we go through cycles, data cycles. And I think it's being able to build a pattern and a rhythm so that it doesn't feel extra into the system, because there's already a lot going on. So you really want to be running these things in the background. And just some of the numbers is engagement rates. It's where my talent and my the key skills that we've got in the business, where they're coming from, where are we going, how do I fill the gaps, what am I even looking, what am I needing, what do similar people in similar roles, how do they present, so how can I translate that so that I make it easier and less gut and more intentional when we go about it. So it really is finding ways to translate the qualitative into the quantitative, and then sometimes it's just verbatims, it's just feedback, and the power in that feedback is phenomenal. And I mean, then AI has gifted us with the ability to package reams of information and pull out what are the key themes, the key trends, the key anecdotes that are coming through it, and giving us really good understanding of where the business is at, where the thinking's at, what should be our next 3 key priority areas that we should focus on as a people team. And that very much comes to us at the time in the business, so that we're almost without the system knowing that we can act proactively versus reactively and fill in the gaps. So I always say to the guys, if you think about medicine, right? The ideal scenario is to look at the symptoms and diagnose the
Sure.
illness. The power lies in being able to predict what's going to happen and proactively create a regime or a treatment or a training program that's going to prevent something from happening. So that is the importance of being able to look at the information, diagnose and understand what it is, but don't stop there. Go further. So what does this mean? Where is it going to go? And what can we do in order to set ourselves up for success? So
Super interesting. And I guess maybe I'm wrong, but there must be some quite robust systems that you have in place in order to, extract the data, in order to then maybe use some AI in terms of understanding what that data is and then presenting on a
yeah,
dashboard. Which a business such as TymeBank, where very established, been in the market quite some time, have got obviously some funds that you're able to dip into to be able to sort of pull these sort of tools together. If you were talking to an earlier stage business that perhaps doesn't have the luxury of
yes,
having the resources that perhaps you have available to you at TymeBank or previously at Retail Cap or RCS or other sort of larger
yeah,
corporates, what advice
sure.
would you give?
Darren, you'll be surprised how much I do in Excel.
Wow.
you'll be you'll be surprised, and you can ask my team. Scouts honor. You can ask my team. I'll give you their numbers. You can call them today. They'll tell you I pivot something out of data. I love raw data. I think if I only rely on tools, I only see the same things over and over again. So I really like to get into the raw data. So if there's anything I can tell any small business, just know the basics in Excel. Being able to build really smart dashboards, Power BI, Tableau, creating S3 buckets where we've got data warehouses and hosting it and then pulling it in and pushing it out and creating. And it's just going to tell you every month where you are on the same information that you had available to you last month. So yes, absolutely, there's very robust systems, but that is just for reporting. You can derive insight from it, but to really make it tangible and to make it real time, you very often need to go to the raw data, and that's often where a simple thing. And for a small business, I'll be very honest. So yes, we do use Slack as a platform to be able to communicate and pull information in, but there's nothing that stops you from using the tools that you've got available. Teams, Microsoft Teams. Most companies have Office 365. They've got Microsoft Forms. The number of people that actually are using the tools they already have in their business to their full capacity. They buy something and only use it for the
Yeah,
purpose of what
yeah,
they bought it, right? And there's nothing that YouTube and a few very smart algorithmically set up Instagram following will not push to you when you start going after the different platforms that you want to get better at, because it's so fast changing, right? There's no way that doing a course today is going to set you up for success over the next 5 years.
no,
It's just not going to happen. So you really need to be actively pursuing the information that on the platforms, the systems, and the processes to be relevant. And that's true for everything. It's not just true for age. It's not just true for this conversation. It's even
Absolutely.
true for
One thing I
everything.
would say though, I made the cardinal sin of giving my phone to my stepdaughter, who then went onto TikTok and started looking at capybaras and French music. Oh,
Sorry.
brilliant! It had all
I'm
my
very much
AI, it had all
relate.
my fintech, it had everything, and now all I get is singing capybaras bathing in the bath.
I've got a tip for you on that, Darren. I'm sacred about my
Right,
music,
okay.
right? Sacred. My playlists are my playlists. And I had the problem on my music, having my algorithm completely messed up. And you'll be surprised, it was not what you'd think. It was 99 Red Balloons. It was old music that my daughter started listening to. And I ended up giving them an account on my maiden name, my old Gmail profile. And I gave it to them, and that's the profile they use for YouTube and platforms so that I can just keep my one
Yeah,
to
I'm not going
myself.
to make that mistake again. And my stepdaughter says, what are you hiding? What don't you want me to see? I'm like, no, it's not about that. Like, honestly, it's not. I genuinely
You don't
yeah,
understand
yeah.
what I know.
Sorry, I digress. Everyone, apologies. So
No.
we've spoken about sort of looking at people analytics when they're in the organisation, but they need to get into the organisation first. So let's talk about the sort of the hiring, the sourcing side. Again, you're looking at a challenger bank. So TymeBank is not a big four with 10,000, 50,000 people doing
100%.
very, very sort of isolated tasks. It's very much a fintech, as was Retail Cap and
Yes.
maybe even RCS in the day.
Yeah.
I suppose the first question is, are there certain traits, and I'm generalizing here, and I appreciate there's lots of different pockets and there's lots of different fields, but um,
Yeah. Yeah.
are there certain traits that you look for as a challenger bank to come into the environment that you've created? Because again, I've been to office many times and sat and had sort of coffees with
No,
Cheslin,
sure.
and he's always very chilled, and Carl's always very chilled, and everyone's kind of relaxed. Whereas you walk into a bank, and I won't name anyone, but there's
Yes.
four big ones. It's very different. It's very, very, very different. So, what do you look for? Are there traits?
So when you look at business, there's key pivotal moments when you move from 50 people to 51 people and 150 to 151 people. Then there's another moment when you reach 300, 400. And I think by the time you get to 6,000, 7,000 people,
Yeah,
more. I mean, it's not even an organism. I mean, it's a living creature. So it's just, it's very different. Now, in any business for me under 1,000, it's still very much founder led. And there's a very strong entrepreneurial culture still present in the organization. It takes a very specific individual to thrive in that kind of an environment. So I just want to caveat the conversation by saying it's not true for any business. There's a very unique environment when you're under 50, and people there can be massively risk taking. They can be innovative. They can play loose and fast almost a little bit with the rules because you're not on everybody's radar. So there's a very specific individual. Some make it across into the 150 type environment. Now you start walking past somebody and you realize, oh, I don't know this guy. Now suddenly you don't know everybody, their partner, their children, and but it's still fast. It's still fast. You still need to respond. You still almost disrupting in your own environment. And it's a little bit more still of a survivalistic nature within the organization. Yeah, sure. Some businesses make it big within the first 3, 5 years. Most businesses in South Africa don't. So there's still very much a
yeah,
survivalistic nature in that space. Then when you get to the 500, 600s, you still want the components and the traits of the people that got it there, and it's still present. But now you need to be a little bit more cognizant, a little bit more professional, a little bit more specific around what it is that you want to portray and what is the culture that you want to drive into the organization, because your 50% of employees are not as close to your founder led, leader led type environments. And even though it's open doors and easygoing, highly accessible leaders that we're very fortunate to have, it's still something that needs to penetrate if you want to keep that in your business. And that very much becomes the oxygen that most fintech, fast paced type businesses survive on. So I just wanted to, I almost want to say, create that
Yeah.
context. But then for me, this is gonna be very controversial. Talent isn't found,
Okay.
it's made. So there's this, I just want to say, myth about there's this war on talent, or there's this big thing about talent is it's scarce and it's rare. A talent is, but that's the 1%. The 20% of highly talented people out there that often is the foundation and the oxygen in your organization, they are made inside the business often. It's, in my experience and in my career, it's been very rare that you are recruiting, specifically using that word, recruiting that person in. Some of the people you recruit do become the talented individuals in the organization later. Absolutely. But there is no way to know the day that you're sitting across the table from that person whether they are going to be that person. So I think there is this idea that talent needs to be found. It's a noble
Does it need
pursuit,
to be found in the first
but
place, especially when you're scaling a business, right? So if you're going from that
yeah,
50 to 100, or you're going from that 100 to 150, adding those
yeah.
numbers, you don't have the resources within the organization to be able to uplift everyone, and just hire sort of graduates in, right? You don't have that luxury. So you have to go and find talent at some point.
So if you go to the world of sports, talent gets found all the time, but they have talent
Absolutely.
scouts. So you've got a person that knows what it is that they're looking for and what they identify. And that process is not a recruitment application process. Sure, sometimes
Yep.
talent comes to you, but a talent scout actively goes out looking for talent. Now, you can either look for that talent inside of your organization, which you need a very specific environment for, or you have people that can find talent either through relationships. You and I know most of the talented people that come through the business that's coming in externally happens by virtue of relationships and people and knowing that there's a need or there's a gap that needs to be filled with a person with
Yep.
this unique talent, and then they become that person. But I always say to them, even if you've got a talent scout that goes and find 5 or 6 people, the whole team is not that. It's 1 or 2. The other 10, 20 people are incredibly talented individuals, but most of that sits around the fact that they can collaborate, that they can connect, that they can complement each other. And those traits are not necessarily linked to skill. So recruitment is easy when you're looking for skills. If you're looking for a fly half, you
Yep.
know what you're looking for. It's a skill. He needs to kick the ball over the poles, right?
Yep.
That's what you want. If you're looking for a talent, you want somebody who can read the game, somebody that has a broader understanding, somebody that almost, it's not, they're not even trying to play the game, they have to
Yep.
play the game because it's who they are as a person, it's inherent. So they can't help themselves. They must be in that space, in that role, in that environment. Now, that person, people know, they notice them. Now, most CEOs and a lot of leadership are actually very good talent scouts because they've been in a lot of those positions themselves. So they know what it is that they're looking for. They know how to spot it, they know the
Sure.
characteristics. But as each talent scout, they all have a type. So they're often looking and attracting people So you've got a tennis scout and you've got a rugby or a football scout. It's rare that a football scout is going to notice a really good tennis
Yeah.
player. So I think where most businesses need to be very smart is that they are not only attracting a certain talent into the organization, because that completely is counterintuitive to creating a space of diversity and having a team play together. You'll end up having all the same people, and all of them are going to be fly offs, or all of them are going to be of a similar type.
Completely agree. You're not going to get the you're not going to get
Okay,
diversity of
so
thought.
you don't. You don't. You don't. So you need to know who your people in the organization that is really good at spotting certain talents. Is this the person that's really good at spotting analysts or analytical thinking? This is a person that's really good at knowing whether somebody's going to be a great engineer.